comes right away. So you need to have a certain amount of cars in the vicinity.
Which they do through supply and demand, both of them.
Okay.
Because every driver uses both.
Okay. Every driver uses both.
They drive for both companies.
Safety,
One phone, both
safety.
apps.
You want to, when you get in an Uber or a Lyft, you want to know that you're in a safe vehicle with a safe driver.
So reputation is important.
More specifically, my friend's impression of safety becomes an important factor to me.
You know what it might also be is that that business may be a social referral business. You may primarily adopt the service that your friends use, and once you adopt one, you may be relatively sticky. You may not always be searching. Social referral businesses lead to a few blockbusters and almost nobody else.
Yeah, because there are 2 or 3 other ones in San Francisco that just can't get any
Totally
traction.
priced. I think it's totally priced with those guys. They're a commoditized industry in terms of competing with the taxi service.
So you'll search, you'll shift.
I use both.
Well, I would shift from a cab to
but not in New
not
York.
amongst them. I don't know what the price. I have no idea what the price difference is.
No, so that actually
But
is
from
so
a
it
cab
is,
to
because
them, yeah. No
so
question.
I would say cab to them is an experiential 100% difference. It is a different model.
Yeah.
Within the model, because they do supply and demand, it could be that one of them can't get enough drivers, so they're running it 2 times what the normal rate would be, and you look at the other one and it's 1.2.
Yeah.
And so you pick, but everybody has their preferred one that they go to.
Yeah, I agree with your point. I mean, I've got Uber on my phone. I don't have Lyft, so.
Well, it's not as many
They
places.
use
It depends on
Uber.
I don't know where you live.
LA.
Yes.
So you,
Yeah, but it's,
you like the ubiquity, the convenience of
My friends
ubiquity.
told me about that, so I use that. And then it kind of feeds into a lot of what you're talking about. And they're going to spend all the money to knock the other one out, and then just jack up the price.
Exactly. Get away
And
from
it's not like they're
subsidizing
going to.
drivers.
It's not a model that you sustain.
Yeah. Although, in a way, cabs are almost like the competitive fringe in that cabs will put a ceiling on what they can charge, right? You'll pay a little bit more for Uber because it's more convenient, but you won't pay a lot more than a cab would charge you because at some point you'll switch to a cab. So that provides a little bit of market discipline.
In New York, it's like that. To
Mhm.
get Uber in New York is ridiculously expensive, so
Yeah.
you really must want
than
to.
cab,
right?
Yeah. I was surprised this morning.
I was just in Miami last week, and we took an Uber, and it was twice the price of a cab. And the thing that was interesting is he actually couldn't park at the airport. So the guy picked us up, and he said, well, we're going to drop you off, but it's not directly at the airport. And I said, well, why wouldn't I just take a cab? That's crazy. I have luggage. I was with 2 of my colleagues. And he said, well, the cabs, the police come after them and ticket them, and the cabs are doing this to kind of also put them out of business.
Yeah.
I mean, he was technically one section over. It was literally across the walkway, but it was twice the price of a cab, and it was because of convenience, and we almost got into an accident too. It wasn't the guy's fault, but it was like, oh my God, what am I doing here,
But
So,
I think the other differentiator though is every Uber I've been in has been a much better experience than
It's a
a
nicer
taxi.
car.
Taxis are dirty
Yeah.
and it's not a pleasant car to be in generally. But an
Money
Uber,
exchange.
Yeah, it's
it's a
like
fine
being in a
car,
limo.
they're clean,
Yeah.
they're efficient,
Yeah.
I don't have the seat jammed up next to me.
It kind of depends on the city, though. Getting in a black car in DC is very different than getting in a black car in New York, which can often be beat up and smelly and have any number of air fresheners hanging off the rearview mirror that you're trying to roll down the window to
The
avoid.
Ubers,
Yes,
here?
yeah. So but it can also be if you select a nice Cadillac Escalade and you want to pay $70 to get from Midtown to
I like
downtown.
being able to pick,
Which is so
depending upon
interesting.
what my trip is.
They make
I think it's a
most
great
of
idea.
their money is no longer made on the black car. Most of their money is made on their Uber X, which is peer-to-peer driving.
And the safety issue too. So if there was a visitor, for example, they can forward their itinerary and you can track them online. So you know exactly where they were, what the driver is, and what the vehicle is. So
That's nice.
instead of picking up someone from the airport or letting them just hail a cab,
Yeah.
we do the Uber from home and say, look for this Uber car. And I know exactly this person is coming at this time and where this person
Yeah.
is.
I like Uber just because if it's raining in New York, you can never get a cab, right? So if it's raining, you can get the cab before you actually go outside. All right. Well, let's use Uber then to think about some of these other categories. Let's think about bargaining power of suppliers and buyers. So the key things that are going to influence their bargaining power here, one of the big ones is how many there are of them versus how many there are of you. All right? So let's think about suppliers. Who are the suppliers to Uber?
Drivers.
Drivers mostly, right? They have their own cars? They own those cars? Okay, so Uber doesn't even have to buy cars. They
They're not a
just,
transportation company.
okay, so they just
Yeah.
drivers.
They're technology.
There's a lot of drivers. Drivers are almost perfectly substitutable,
Mm-hmm.
right? Very hard for the drivers to become differentiated. They could get stars after they work for Uber, but when they come to the organization, they don't have any stars attached to their name that give them any pull with the organization.
And once you drop below a certain rate, they actually don't let you drive anymore.
Okay, so
So
this,
it's impossible to differentiate.
so those suppliers will have virtually no bargaining power. Now, the one form of bargaining power they might have is that they have a couple of companies they can work for. So they can work for Uber or Lyft, it sounds like. It sounds like some of them do both, which means there's very little switching costs to move back and forth. Now what that means is that if Uber pays a little less than Lyft, they might switch. If Lyft pays a little less than Uber, they might switch. Right? That's giving them a little bit of bargaining power there.
Even the taxi drivers in DC have Uber and or Lyft.
Okay, all right, so
They
that's
used to
probably
just
been
Uber
really
taxi.
valuable for the suppliers.
Really? Yeah.
Interesting.
So you can actually watch the
Zachy? You want to your hand up? Who are the buyers? This is an easy one. You're the buyers, right? This is an end consumer market. Now, let's think, there's a lot of you, you're perfectly fragmented, almost none of you are organizing groups to negotiate with Uber and Lyft, right? On the other hand, you have low search costs. Wait, where am I looking? I'm over here, but buyers. You have low switching costs, low search costs. You're probably reasonably well informed about prices, or you can get well informed pretty quickly online, right? You can get a fair estimate. Those are the things that give you power. Now, if you're in a market where there's more people trying to hail a car and not too many cars, what happens? Price goes up, right? That's them exerting their bargaining power. On the other hand, if you're in a market where they have lots of cars, or maybe you have two competitors competing against each other, suffering from this duopoly price war dynamic, your bargaining power goes up, price goes down, right? So it's all about, and now, what if Uber were incredibly differentiated from Lyft? What if they had really different services that really mattered to you? What would that do to their pricing power? Yeah.
Sorry,
Something else?
It's not this yet, something else I was thinking about. I think Uber is a bit more complicated than what we are thinking here. Maybe supply part and buy part, because I think initially suppliers have a lot of power here. Because imagine Uber, I'm the customer, and I order for a cab and it does not come to me.
Okay, hold on. When you say supplier power, when we use this model, we have to be really careful. Right now, Uber's the rival, the competitor. Suppliers are suppliers to Uber, like drivers.
Yes, I'm talking about drivers.
Oh, okay, sorry, never mind.
Yeah,
Go
so
on.
drivers, I think initially they have a lot of power, because the job for Uber is actually, if a customer says that, you know, I need a car and it will come in 4 minutes, it has to come in 4 minutes, because it's for expedient, right? Uber is selling expedient. So I think initially, when Uber goes into a city, I think drivers have a lot of power. Of course, they choose them carefully, but they have to make sure that the suppliers make certain amount of money, they work for a certain amount of hour, and they have to make sure that they make more money than they could have made in certain other jobs. So I think initially drivers have a lot of power in Uber case, which might not be once they get established in a city like
It's not
San
power that
Francisco.
they know though, they
Yeah,
can't
but they
really
don't-
come together and
Right.
say, we want to
No, but what
acquire more
happens-
money, they're just sort of passively receiving the benefit that Uber says, oh, I need to make a market footprint.
Correct, but let's say if you go and we are starting Uber in London, right? Not these are established markets, or in other city, let's say city where Atlanta is not there, for example. Then what's the most important thing? That drivers should be available at the time the customers need them. And for that, drivers have to have benefits which are actually more than what they could have had doing something else.
Well, and there
Yeah,
has
but I
to be
think
a
the
lot of
supply of people that are available to
Right.
drive, that's like saying, if I'm gonna go into a new city and open a market, the people that I'm gonna hire have the power. They
No,
don't, there's so many people that need a job. And I think
No.
you have the same thing with the Uber drivers.
Right, but I think we don't think that they have power, but we think that we have to empower them to make sure that they make money and stay with us and provide the service we want our customers to have.
Well, I
Can
think
I
I think
rephrase
it's
what you're
similar
saying?
to employees, I mean,
Yeah.
you have the same thing.
You have to pay them
They're
enough
just
so they can do
independent
their job.
contractors.
Right,
Yeah.
and you might not have that kind of customers initially.
Can I reframe what you're saying? Because I think one of the things you're pointing out that I hadn't actually realized, which explains why this industry has network externalities and why they're fighting so hard to be dominant, It is tippy, because when you first go into a market, I mean, if you think about a city like New York, right? Well, that's not a very good drawing of Manhattan, but if you want to have drivers that can pick people up within 5 minutes so that people want to use your service, you have to have a lot of drivers. But if you were to hire a bunch, if you signed up a bunch of drivers, but they had very few fares, then they would leave. So there's this jump starting phenomenon. It is tippy because you have to have enough people using the service to attract enough buyers, to have enough, to attract enough drivers, and you have to have enough drivers to make it valuable for people to use the service. So if you, so when you have more, you're going to have a much more, you have a better service with the more drivers that you have.
Or we can say that we have so many numbers of drivers who will make sure that they make money.
Well, you might have to actually guarantee them some amount of pay initially to jumpstart this process. Even if they're not driving anyone, you might have to give them money.
Yeah, that's the point I was.
That's exactly like the video game console company subsidizing to put the console into your home.
And there was an ad on the radio for Uber when I was driving to work the other day, and basically said your first person you pick up, we guarantee $500 for your first ride. I mean, they were actually recruiting people on, I think it was like 10-10 wins or something, which I thought was interesting.
Another model that they use, which is actually pretty neat, is when it gets to surge pricing, so it gets more expensive from a supply-demand perspective. What used to happen is they would go up, a lot of your phone would get sort of buzzed that now it's at X. A lot of drivers would come back on, it would drop right back down because now there's more supply than demand.
Yeah.
So they actually changed it that once it gets above a certain amount, they guarantee drivers X amount per hour for 4 hours or something like that to drive.
Yeah, it's a great way to build scalability into the business. It's awesome. All right, let's move on. So I think you're getting the idea here. We've covered. Let's look at an example here of IKEA. Also a privately held company, wanted to keep its profits secret. Finally released information about its profits, I don't know, about 4 years ago or something, and we went, what? My God. Because the retail furniture industry is a tough industry, very tough. On the one hand, it's mature, it's fragmented, although you have a few large chains like Crate and Barrel, Pottery Barn. But have you ever noticed that anything cool that Pottery Barn does, Crate and Barrel will immediately imitate? And anything Crate and Barrel does, Pottery Barn will immediately imitate? And then both of them also introduced a lower end product to compete on a lower market segment with the same style features like CB2 and West Elm, right? So there's just not a lot of room to be really unique. People don't buy furniture very often. They will invest heavily in hunting it down, looking at it, evaluating the quality. They'll know what the price point is on the couches that they're considering, and it's what we call elaborative processing. They'll invest in search for these products, which increases the bargaining power of the customer. Typically, the stores are in convenient locations because you want people, what we call a high street location. So there's a Pottery Barn right down here on Broadway, there's a Crate and Barrel right down here on Broadway, which makes it really easy for price to compare, which lowers their pricing power. And they have mostly variable costs, so they don't tend to sell products below cost very often. So mature industry was not traditionally very profitable. If you looked at, it had no growth basically in the United States, and if you looked at the profitability over time, it hovered around 3 to 4% over the last decade. Not really someplace you wanted to put your money, because you could do better just putting your money into a mutual fund probably. And then we suddenly discovered IKEA was making big money. We didn't know because they'd kept their profits secret. We actually discovered a really remarkable thing. Ingvar Kamprad, have you ever seen pictures of this guy? He's like a really old Swedish guy. He wears funny hats, he rides the bus. They think he's actually probably the wealthiest man in the world, and he still takes the bus. And it was a secret. Nobody knew he was the wealthiest man in the world because they were hiding all the money through trusts. They didn't want to pay a lot of taxes. Now, how could IKEA be so profitable in a mature, competitive industry, fragmented industry? How could they do that? Well, they did things a little different, right? So everybody else was buying furniture. This is their supplier. And the furniture might be differentiated. It was certainly assembled. Its quality was known, and you paid a price that was, reflective of that. And then the furniture retailer was, oh sorry, not a very good drawer, had showrooms, and they let you come in and you pick out what you wanted, and if you wanted something customized, it might take 6 weeks, and then they would deliver it fully assembled, and then over here you have the customer, the end consumer. All right, that's the model for virtually everybody else in this industry, right? So these guys are doing all the design, all the manufacture, all the assembly. These guys are just a place, right? That's a difficult environment to create a lot of margin because people aren't particularly loyal to a place. If they can get the exact same couch at Pottery Barn and at Crate and Barrel, or almost exact same couch, and Pottery Barn and Crate and Barrel are across the street from each other on Broadway, now you're competing on price, right? There's not a lot of opportunity to differentiate. On the other hand, what IKEA did was IKEA took over the design, didn't assemble, right? So now furniture is all coming flat pack, designed by IKEA. So IKEA is creating all the differentiation and the styles and the unique features of the product. And then they have much lower warehousing costs. Much lower transportation costs. They can stock a much larger number of individual items. We'll call those shopkeeping units, SKUs. And now the customer has to do assembly. But they don't have to wait. IKEA doesn't usually provide delivery, although you can pay a little extra and get that done. So it's a radically different business model. You've lowered the power of the supplier dramatically by taking over design and assembly. You've lowered the costs of the main function here. You've increased the ability to offer an incredible showroom, right? You guys have been to the IKEA showroom. It's a much bigger, at least, experience than the typical furniture showroom. And you've shifted some of the product process to the customer, and for a particular segment of the customer base, they don't mind that much. They mind a little. Right? If you've ever bought a dresser at IKEA, you might have had to rethink this whole business model. but yeah.
I think one of the things that they also did that added to their profitability is they took out the broker or sales force that's between the furniture manufacturer and the showroom.
Okay.
That's a pretty costly component that they don't have.
So before the suppliers had
Because the showrooms don't buy directly generally. There's a sales guy out there, a broker, a lot of industries, our industry has brokers and distributors and so forth. When you cut them out, there's no value add that's just taken out of the equation.
Yeah.
And that's why a company like IKEA and some of these other places, I think, end up being so much more profitable because people don't realize these hidden costs that are in there. When you're in a business where you can pull that out, it just goes to the bottom line.
The location also goes along with that, right? Because they're not generally in, like, there, you have to travel out.
Right.
So was it Red Hook or someone down more like
Yeah.
you go out to
So
New
no
Jersey.
high street location,
So
that
you don't
lowers
have
their
anybody else
costs.
immediately around you. You can put all sort of other lower cost items like plants and buckets and whatever you want in there that you will buy that because it's convenient and your real estate costs are much less than everything else.
And that gets to the point you're making about the logistics. I mean, they're a great logistics company like a Walmart or something like that. That's another reason they drive such value is the whole process that they go through.
Or the quality level, generally than the other furniture stores.
Yeah, I mean, that's hence
Materials.
because you assemble it yourself, so it's, you know.
Well, but even
it's
plywood
different.
versus
No,
plywood,
and
right?
that's a choice, because that wouldn't have to be the case, right? You could have their whole business model and still use higher quality lumber and fittings and stuff, right?
Sure.
I don't know if you'd use dovetail joinery and still have people assemble it themselves, but
That's
you could
right.
probably use less like fiberboard,
Right.
right? Cool, we could actually talk about it more, but I think you get the idea. Now, the key thing that IKEA's been able to do, which related to positioning. They've lowered costs a lot, right? By having standardized products that they designed, sold in a flat pack, huge savings in transportation costs and warehousing costs. It also lowers the bargaining power of the supplier. So a typical furniture company is buying an assembled good from someone who may have some differentiation and may produce special products. None of the suppliers to IKEA are special anymore, right? IKEA did the design, it's all standardized. So lower the cost of the product, lower the cost of the transportation, lower the cost of the warehousing, get rid of the cost of assembly, get rid of the cost of delivery, go to a non-high street location. All those things lower the cost. If it lowered the price proportionately, they would not be profitable. The thing is that the price doesn't go down as far as the cost because there are still things that keep willingness to pay reasonably high. Maybe not as high as Crate and Barrel, but not as low as, let's say, Target or Walmart, right? They still have cool style. We like the style. They still have a huge selection, right? The disadvantage of the high street location is you have to schlep, let's say, out to Brooklyn. The advantage of schlepping out to Brooklyn is that it becomes your whole day, right? And they have designed the store to make it very difficult to escape in less than a day, right? It's a destination. Like, what are you doing Saturday? I'm going to IKEA. Nobody says I'm going to Crate and Barrel. That's not someone's Saturday, right? But IKEA could very well be your whole Saturday. If you buy anything, it could be your whole weekend. And they've also done some interesting things there too to keep you there. Some of them have childcare. One of them even now has man care. You can like check in your man, and there's foosball and beer and football on the TV. And apparently this frees you up to do more shopping. I saw a commercial on that. It was really hilarious. They have food so that you have sustenance. It's about halfway through in the labyrinth, so they've really thought this through. Right?
Not sure though if they also thought strategically about turnover. Because the thing with IKEA furniture is you change it often and it provides a lot of good furniture for dorms.
Yeah.
So, and usually you don't want to break it up because you can't put it back together. So you just leave it there and move to the next apartment. So
Yes. Some movers won't even move IKEA furniture.
Exactly. So the turnover is faster, which pretty much makes up for their price.
So people come back and buy. The other thing that's happening, how many times have you gone into IKEA because you needed a couch or needed a wardrobe for your kid and walked out with about 60 other things? So the labyrinth is designed for the impulse shopping. And you may have really researched couches and you're like, my God, that Ektorp couch is only $250. That's the best deal on a couch ever. But you didn't do any price comparison on that silicone spatula that you never knew you needed, or the 46 picture frames and pillows that are now going to decorate your living room. So the impulse shopping is probably where a lot of the profitability is. We don't know because they're secretive, like you guys. You guys probably have impulse shopping too. One time it was pointed out to me in a class, brilliant insight of a student, we were talking about how awkward the online ordering system is. You ever tried to order anything online at IKEA?
Yeah.
First of all, things come with names like Schlitterkopf. You know, I need to order a Schlitterkopf. And how many Leitentouches do I need to assemble my Schlitterkopf? It's really very, very difficult. And there's a lot of goods that they have at the store that they don't have in the catalog. And that's when we realized that's because they don't really want you to do online shopping. They don't want you to just buy the $250 Ektorp sofa. That's not how they make their money.
I think the impulse buy, they're similar to me to Costco, where there's a lot of impulse buying that goes on. And I think you're walking into a store where you've developed trust with the brand. So they've taken away the risk of the purchase. It's easy to return, but at IKEA, it's all IKEA. So if you're bought into the whole idea of IKEA, then you don't need to go research the price of this other product. You know the quality's there, and I think Costco does a similar thing. They have a great return policy. Yeah, I don't know, maybe I do need a TV in that room over there. Or here's one for $100, I'll pick it up. Because I'm not gonna be embarrassed when I look at the Sunday ads and go, oh my God, I could have saved a ton of money.
Yeah.
So they take away the risk, which I think helps with the impulse part.
You trust the price. Yeah, it's the same with Walmart. Walmart saves a lot of money on advertising by just convincing people, look, our price is always the lowest, don't even bother shopping around.
Right.
Okay, it's time to actually take a break. So why don't we should we